Will, talk to me.
ABC Tuesday.
They took his daughter. She's coming home alive.
Will Trent, the series critics are calling powerful must-see TV, continues to thrill.
Shouldn't we strategize before we go in there?
If we screw up this case, a cop killer walks free.
With the riveting conclusion to a 2-part season premiere.
GBI!
Help me!
Get down!
Will Trent, all new Tuesday on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Commitment issues. What if it's a bigger issue that you're not fully aware of and that you're not fully committed to understanding just yet? Hello. Happy days, guys. Welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, and up your you. I'm your host, Isaiah, and, the one thing I love about life is the challenging questions that arise when you're just living it. I think relationships as a whole are typically the catalyst or the epicenter of a lot of what we experience, what we seek to have. I'm going to pull up a chair because this is going to be an interesting podcast. Hang on. Yeah, so when it comes to relationships, when it comes to connections, we desire a lot of things, but we are not fully clear on what those things are. And I caught myself thinking about that today. I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were just, exchanging conversation, having, exchanging of thoughts and experiences in just life. And question arose of, what is it that you are willing to commit to? What is it that you are willing to commit to? And I was thinking about that for myself, right? I was thinking about that and I was going through the process in terms of, well, what does that look like? What is it that I'd be willing to commit to? Because when you commit to something else, you are also saying no to something else, right? A yes to something is a no to something else. And when we say we want things, for a myriad of reasons, there's a lack of specificity involved, right? When we say that we want things, it's like, what do I have the time for? Right? Do I have the space to allow another person into my life? Because I think a lot of times when we say, like, we are even ready for a relationship, and it's like, okay, what does being ready for a relationship look like? Well, I'm ready to have a companion, ready to start a family. I'm ready to do this. And it's like, okay, what does that look like? What are you committing to, right? What are you willing to commit to, right? When you think about your ideal partner or even friendships, right? Your ideal connections with other people, what level of commitment is there for you? What does your commitment level look like? What does it look like? How much of your time do you want to give away? Right? I think it's interesting, whether you're single, you're in a connection, or you have a certain just system that you orchestrate from or just operate out of, when you incorporate someone new or something new into that, there's going to be a shift, right? Because there's a space being filled where there wasn't something previously. And when that comes about, a lot of things can come with that too. We have to realize it's like we play a highlight reel in terms of like what our ideal connection looks like. It's like, oh, you're sitting on a couch, you're going on vacation with somebody, right? You're watching movies, you're staying in, and all those things. And it sounds dope. But those are the highlights. What about the rest of the relationship? Do you have space for that? Are you committed to that? Right? What about disagreements? What about learning about each other's traumas and past experiences? Okay. What about really doing the work in terms of like understanding what your hangups may be? How much are you willing to commit? Right? When we say that we want easy relationships sometimes, even, or we just want a relationship at all, we're not fully clear. And I caught myself in that space of like, I thought about this, but there's room for me to think a lot deeper. Okay. And I think a lot of times, people will randomly ask other people like, oh, are you in a relationship? It's like a better question is, am I looking for one? I'm not ready for a relationship. A lot of times it's simply, I'm not looking to commit to a certain level, right? My level of commitment is not what this relationship is. Actually, this relationship might require a certain level of responsibility I don't have, and nor do I really want to give. And, they say all the time, when somebody wants something, they are willing to change and adjust and all those things. And that can be very true. But we have to understand sometimes, even if somebody changes in that moment because they want to keep that thing, if they are not equipped to nurture that thing and foster it, then the resentment comes up, right? So even though somebody was ready in that moment, doesn't mean they are ready for the moments to come, right? Yes, the idea of us being together is dope. That's fantastic. I like that. Cool. Say less. And then when it actually comes along and all the other components are not there, it's like, oh, well, this isn't working for me. And that could be fine, right? Sometimes the relationship may not work, right? Because the highlight reel was the driving force of the relationship versus what was actually real about the relationship, right? And again, when I talk about relationships, I always want you just to consider the people in your life as a whole, not even romantic partnerships, although, that is a big commitment, right? A romantic partnership, a significant other is a big commitment. Friendship, you're allowed a little bit more leniency just because the requirement or the standard to see somebody every day or whatever is not there. However, it's still a commitment that you have to show up for. You have to be willing to show up for and commit. If the commitment aspect is not there, then the relationship will not be there. Okay? If your level of commitment does not align with what's needed for the relationship, and obviously we know this to some degree, but if you are not clear on what you are willing to commit to, then you're always going to be confused about what a relationship looks like for you. Does that make sense? Sometimes we only scratch the surface in terms of like, well, I want a companion. All right, cool. What role do they play in your life then? What role do you play in your relationships? Take a look at all your relationships. Take a look at the people in your life, right? Take a look at that dynamic. What role do you play typically in your relationships? What role do you want to play? What role do you want other people to play in your life? Your significant other, what role do you want them to play? besides just being your partner? Like who handles the finances, right? Who handles the planning? Okay. Who's going to be tasked with like anything really? Like being very specific in terms of what it is that you are willing to participate in and how you want somebody else to participate in your life, I think even is work that we don't always consider. Right? We don't always think of it to that capacity because we just think, oh yeah, I want a relationship, we'll figure the rest out. Like relationships require a certain level of planning too. You can't just go with the flow with people. It's not like that because we have to understand people are moving molecules just like we are. Think about how many thoughts and experiences and hangups and happy moments you have within any given day. Okay. And you're aware of that. And even then there are some things that bypass your threshold. Now think of another person who you do not necessarily spend all day in their head. What experiences they may be having that could potentially influence the relationship, right? A lot of times the relationship that we desire is simply based on our desires solely without there being room for the other person to participate. Like, how is this person showing up for me, right? Not necessarily how am I showing up for the other person. Also understanding too is like, however you may be used to showing up could be fear-based. It could be a trauma response. Right? Have you worked through that? Have you been working through it? What does that look like? Okay. Your operative in relationships could simply be to keep people from leaving you. And the way you do that is by kind of overextending, overgiving, right? And not allowing other people to take care of you. So like very hyper independent. And we have to understand like the hyper independence keeps you cut off from the community that you actually desire to have. The hyper independence is a result of you understanding that you didn't have community that you desired and you having to resort to just being self-reliant. But you resort to self-reliance because it's like, while you may want people to show up, you haven't had it. So you're afraid of being disappointed in or let down. You see what I'm saying? Are you willing to commit to allowing somebody to I don't know, participate a little bit more than what you're used to? Are you willing to commit to the idea of being helped? Are you willing to commit to the idea of being held accountable? Right? We say we want emotionally mature people, emotionally intelligent people. What happens when that emotionally intelligent person is holding you accountable for your behavior in terms of how you may treat them, right? It doesn't just go one way. What happens with that information? What do we do about it? What are you willing to commit to? How much of your time are you willing to give away? Right? How much time are you willing to invest? It's kind of the same thing.
In the summer of 1994, 4 teens entered an abandoned building in Gravesend, Brooklyn. It was the last time they would be seen alive. With few clues and no witnesses, the case went cold. But for Anthony Brewer, the brother of one of the victims, the search never stopped. In 2024, he acquired evidence from the police that contained DNA samples that didn't match the teens. That discovery put his life and the life of his family in grave danger. Goosebumps, The Vanishing. All episodes now available on Disney Plus and Hulu on DisneyPlus.Disney.com. Rated TV 14 LV.
You know? How much are you willing to commit? And then we say we have commitment issues. Sometimes it's not even the commitment issue. It's the issue of clarity that we're actually lacking. Like, I'm not clear on what I fully want yet. Right? I'm not fully clear about that yet. So therefore, it's showing up in how I navigate relationships, which is why, they say you are what you attract. It's like, no, you attract everything. What you cultivate probably aligns more with who you are. So if you are existing in these perpetual patterns of people who are just as like confused, or they're never ready for a relationship, or they're not ready to commit, the truth of the matter is to ask yourself, how ready am I to commit? Am I actually looking for that? Or am I afraid of commitment? Do I fear an actual relationship? And if I do fear an actual relationship, why? And don't just say, oh, somebody else is going to let me down. It's like, no, what about your responsibility are you afraid of? What is it about you that you're actually fearful of? What does it look like? What is the idea version of you? What do they do on a day-to-day basis, right? Who do they have around them? What do they have around them? The big question is, what does my level of commitment look like right now? That was really something I thought about. I was like, man, what does my level of commitment look like right now? And I didn't have a full answer. To be honest with you, I didn't have a full answer. The reason why is because I recognize how committed I am to other things. Right? And those things are important things to me. There's just not like leisure. It's like these things are important things. But even in that, I have to be a little bit more aware of what I'm committing to. Right? Priorities are organized choices. So what are you prioritizing? What are you choosing? What does that look like? Sometimes the commitment issue is you. The commitment issue is you. And it's just a matter of you needing to get a little bit more clear in terms of like, what am I making space for? What am I making time for? When you say you want a partner, okay, I want somebody who's like emotionally intelligent, financially responsible, all these things. And truth be told, it's kind of like you can find those. However, they're very rare. And who are you? I know there are a lot of people who just want to be taken care of. And it's like you want to sit back and be on the receptive end of all these needs and wants being met. However, how are you present? What are you committing to? Or are you looking for somebody who's going to be okay with you not taking care of them? Is that what you desire? Some people may not readily admit that, but that's the truth. Some people like the idea of being in a relationship that is for them. Why? Because the relationship is solely for them. And that's cool, right? If another person is okay with that, and them being okay with that could be their own reasoning, right? That could be a trauma response. That could be an abandonment thing. Humans as a whole, like, we're very fickle and very interested, and can be very simple, but at the same time, very complex. So it's like just a matter of finding where you resonate the most, like in what you actually desire from life. And again, that's something that I'm still working through. Like with all the things I've created, like, it's still a work in progress for me in terms of like, what am I willing to commit to? What do I want to make space for? What do I have room for? Who? So I want you to really take that seriously. Be a little bit more clear and a little bit more honest. And where it's uncomfortable and where you find resistance, lean into that, right? Because the lazier we are with our willingness to commit or our awareness of what we're committing to, the lazier our relationships are going to look and be and feel. And it's funny, when we have lazy relationships, we end up working harder to keep them. Right? It's kind of the one that never does their job. If you have a lazy relationship, that is an indication that you, to some degree, or the other person, have not been fully clear in terms of commitment levels, what the job requirements are. I hope that makes sense, guys. It's definitely something I've been chewing on and really processing, because I'm like, man, what does commitment actually look like? What does commitment look like for you? What does it look like for you? How do you define it? What are you willing to give up? Are you willing to give up your identity, right? Are you willing to give up your routine, right? Are you willing to give up certain relationships to commit to this particular relationship? Like, what are you willing to give up? How much? How much? I want you to ask yourself that. If you want better for your life, how much am I willing to commit to? How much am I willing to give up? It matters. It really matters. But we don't always realize that, right? Until our relationships start kind of hitting a wall and you're like, well, what the hell is happening? Well, it's like, well, what am I committed to? Who am I committed to? All right, so just something to think about. Something to really process. Even with your own personal growth, how much are you willing to commit to that? Listening to a podcast every day, watch somebody's social media, reading a book, like none of that is necessarily committing to growth. It's a start because you are seeking out resources. However, how are you applying that knowledge and the discipline on your day-to-day? Commitment is a real thing, and you got to look at what you're committed to. All right. With that being said, I hope you guys have an amazing week. I hope this gives you something to think about. Definitely gave me something to process. And yeah, coaching is available. I have slots open. Link is in the bio for the website. It breaks down how I move, the practices that I use, and you can also book on the website. And merch is available. Coloring book is available. Yeah, one of my books is available. And the merch is also available as well. But yeah, guys, just something to think about, all right? In the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and take flight.